Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another podcast in JW's Old Comic Corner. Before we begin the show, I just want to say that I'm sorry that I didn't get much podcasting done over the last 6 months. Something very important to me to do. I really enjoy this stuff, but fortunately we had some family stuff to take care of, and I ended up spending 6 months over in Northern California where I used to live. And now I'm back home in Arizona, and I'm back in my corner, which is actually my garage. But anyway, if you're a subscriber and you're tuning in again, thank you. I really mean that. Thank you for watching. It really makes me want to keep doing this stuff and hoping that maybe there's a chance that you'll learn some stuff about some of these important things about comics, comic artists, writers, the stories, the characters, all that kind of stuff that make comic book reading fun. If you're new, welcome. I hope you enjoy this, and if you get a chance, I hope you'll take a look at some of my other podcasts that I have. So it's quite an array of stuff, and I plan to keep on doing this as long as I can. So anyway, also, we're going to get on with the comic book artist of this podcast. But first, you're going to get introduced to a JW's Old Comic Corner jingle. My son, the computer nerd, created this for me during the 6 months that I was gone. And I thought it was pretty good. It was kind of fun. I actually have 4 or 5 different versions of it, too. So I won't subject you guys to all of that unless you want to hear them. But anyway, with that, let's get on with the show, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
Old JW's got a mic in hand. Stories of yore from a comic land. Tune in close, he's got a plan, bringing history through sound. His tales echo from the past. Heroes, villains, their spells cast. Laughter, drama, a podcast blast. Every episode, a lasting brand. JW's Old Comic Corner, oh, where the legends live and grow. Painted panels line the show. Every word a vibrant glow. Jokes and capes in a joyful spree. Eccentric wisdom, you'll agree. From Silver Age to 90s spree, he's the guide through comic scree. Ancient war and colorful night, Wonder Man's epic fight. Each detail bright as night under JW's guiding light. JW's Old Comic Corner, oh, where the legends live and grow. Painted panels line the show. Every word a vibrant glow.
Hi, and welcome to another episode or podcast of Comic Book Artists. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite artists. His name is Gene Colan. His picture is just below me. And he has been around for quite a long time. And I really liked his stuff. I didn't realize I liked this stuff until I found out who he was and a lot of the books that he drew. But anyway, we're going to go over his style of artwork, which I thought was really, really good for like horror titles and books that required almost a dark tone to them. Batman, Daredevil, especially Doctor Strange, things like that. And we'll cover that as much as we can. As I do this, I'm going to show you mainly cover art. And if I can find, original pencils or inked before color stuff or original art next to the cover, I'm going to try and do that. And there will be some internal pages too, but mostly the cover work, a lot easier to work with. I just want to let you know that at the end of this podcast is his bibliography, and let me tell you, it's pretty extensive. It took me a week to compile it all and put it all in order and stuff. So if you get a chance, you may want to take a look at that. You'll be amazed at how much stuff this man did. So anyway, let's get on with Gene Colan. Gene Colan was born on September 1st, 1926, to his father Eugene and his mother Winifred Colan in the Bronx of New York City. His father was an insurance salesman, and his mother owned an antique store at that time. And they actually had changed their name from the original name, which was Colan, to Colan. Thought that was interesting. He was told from his parents that he liked to start drawing when he was 3 years old. Evidently, he liked to draw animals. Lions were his favorite. And that he moved on from that, drawing his grandfather when he came to visit. He really liked his grandfather, and he would draw a lot of him. His earlier influences was a comic newspaper strip called Dickie Dare, and there should be some illustrations of all this stuff as I go through it. At age 4, his family moved to Long Beach. He grew up enjoying, besides Dickie Dare and stuff, was a couple other, strip artists. One was Milton Caniff, and the other one was Sid Shore, and you'll see stuff again of what they did. And they would become major influences on his art style. He would attend George Washington High School as he got older, and later attended Art Students League of New York City. In 1944, at age around 17, 18, somewhere in there, Gene began doing illustrations for a comic that was out called Wings Comics. And it was a comic about, the airplane flyers of World War II, and the battles they did and stuff. And he started contributing stuff, illustrations for it. And he showed it to them. And he would be given his first published work on a one-page wingtips filler in issue number 52 in 1944. And this is an image here. The following month, he would then be allowed to draw a 7-page Clipper Kirk story from the same comic. And there's some images of this also. During this time, Gene decided that since the war was going, he wanted to enlist, but he wasn't old enough. And so he tried. He went to the Marine Corps and tried to get in, but his dad found out and went down there and stopped him and said, no, you're not going right now. You're too young. But that wouldn't last long because eventually Gene Colan would reach 18 or 19 and he would enlist in the Army Air Corps. And he was destined to be an aerial gunner. But the war ended when he joined, and so was sent to Biloxi Army Camp. And he was trained there for boot camp and stuff, and then was assigned to the Philippines. The war was over. He would become a corporal during that time, and still wanting to do artwork and stuff, he would go to the Manila Times and start doing illustrations for them. And he did a lot of them, evidently, and they liked it because they ended up giving him an art award for his stuff, which I think is pretty cool. Wish I could have seen some of that. In 1946, he will leave the Army, and he will return to civilian life. And Gene would join up with a company called Timely Comics. Timely Comics would later on be merged into Marvel Comics. And he got in by drawing a 7-page war story. And he went to Timely Comics and met Al Sulman, and he was an assistant to then editor-chief Stan Lee. And he looked it over and said, it's pretty good stuff. I think we'll give him a job. So Jane's first Timely work was in a book called Lawbreakers Always Lose, #1, in spring of 1948. And his first story in that was called Adam and Eve Crime Incorporated, and this should be an image of it. Gene, when he went to work for Timely, was making a massive $60 per week, and Sid Shore was to become his art director. Remember, Sid Shore was someone that he admired early on, so I guess that was probably pretty cool that he got to work with them. Unfortunately, during these times, if you go back and look at any of this stuff, if you get a chance, you'll find that a lot of credit for the writer, artist, inker, colorist, all the people that work on it usually was not included in a lot of it. So there's a good chance that even in my bibliography there's some Gene Colan stuff that probably is not there or not listed because it hasn't been found yet. So hopefully they'll keep finding it because they are finding this stuff. There are people who are, experts, and they can look art over and say, you know what, this looks like about what Gene Colan would have looked like, And so I think that's how a lot of this work is being found. But anyway, Gene did draw a 12-page lead story in Captain America Comics number 72. And here's an image of it. And, his first superhero work. In 1948, though, sadly, Gene, along with most of the staff at Timely Comics, were eventually laid off due to a downturn in the comic industry. I guess people were getting kind of bored of certain books, and they started cutting the staff to save money. But that was okay. Gene, being the artist and kind of guy that he is, he would go ahead and go over to national periodicals, which would later become DC Comics. And he did things like All-American Men at War, #3, Mystery in Space 13, Our Army at War, #5, just to name a few. And then there was another company called Quality, which would later become part of DC, where he did like Heartthrobs 9, Love Letters 18. Then he moved to Atlas Comics, which would later be absorbed into Marvel. And he would continue doing, I guess they picked up Lawbreakers Always Lose, #6, Battle Action 4, Battlefield 5, Frontier Western 11, Gunsmoke Western 35, and at Marvel Comics, Amazing Mysteries 33, Battle #11, Best Love 36, Best Western #58, Black Rider #11, and Captain America Comics #75. And he only did the cover on that. And hopefully I can get you some images of this stuff so you can see what I'm talking about. But he was, pretty busy. It wasn't like he ran out of work, I'll tell you. It also became known that Gene, who I guess was kind of a perfectionist, and he wanted to make sure things were correct, he would do lots of research, especially when he did any of his war stories at that time. He wanted them to be as accurate as possible to show how the army did their work, how the soldiers, fought their wars and stuff. And so he would find photos and use them as research and then take from them and then design his paneling and his pictures around what he was seeing. And I thought that was pretty good that he was wanting to be that accurate. We move up into, that was in the late 40s, and in the 1950s, he moved his family, because he's married and has kids, to New Rochelle, New York. Man, New Rochelle, New York. I remember that being stated in the Dick Van Dyke Show. That was where he lived, I believe. I could be wrong. Anyway, he took over penciling chores on a DC comic that was recently acquired called Hopalong Cassidy, the comic book. And he did that from 1954 to 1957. Here's some images for you. And so he moved on into the 1960s. In the early 60s, he once again moved his family to New Jersey, and with his wife Adrian and 2 children, Eric and Nancy. He would also continue freelancing for DC Comics. There was a name change after that point, no more national periodicals, and he was on many romance books. But also in the 1960s, Marvel came into being. They ended up absorbing, I assume, the Timely Comics stuff and the Atlas books, and of course Marvel Comics, and would reignite and restart their company and call it Marvel Comics, with Stan Lee as, I guess, publisher or editor-in-chief. And they would begin creating new titles and take up some of the old titles still and change them. And all these comic companies were called Marvel Comics. And so what would happen, one was called Tales to Astonish. And what happened was in 1965, in issue number 70, Gene Colan would take over, and he would reintroduce an old 40s assumed Timely character or Atlas character called the Submariner. And it proved to be very, very successful. And then after it was so successful that, and he probably needed more work and wanted to work, he would also take on art chores in 1966 in Tales of Suspense number 73. And he'll be taking over Iron Man from Don Heck as he moved on to other things in the Marvel Comics. And here should be a picture of the cover. During this time, though, he did not put his name in it as Gene Colan. He put in his name as Adam Austin. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was because he was still doing work for DC, possibly. It just was interesting to find out that they do surnames. A lot of artists did that in the 60s, evidently. But clearly, these titles will do very well. Marvel editor Stan Lee saw that they were doing very well and decided, man, we need to get Gene working for us full time. And so he went and got to Gene and talked to him and said, I think you need to leave DC and come work for me full time at the new Marvel Comics because I like your art and you're doing a good job. And so he did. And when he went there, he would learn Stan Lee's new method of artistry and storytelling, the Marvel method of artistry, as they called it. What happens there was the writer, say Stan Lee, would call or provide the plot to the artist, Gene Colan, usually 4 paragraphs or so. And then the artist, Gene Colan, would have to make a 20-page story out of it. The pages would then go to Stan Lee, who would then dialogue and caption these pages, and then off to the colorists and stuff. During this time, Gene Colan was working with Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Don Heck, all the rest of those guys. And he decided that he wanted to kind of alter his style slightly. He didn't want to, not that he had any problem with it, but he just decided he wanted to not be exactly alike or looking too much like the other guys. He wanted his own way of doing it. And that's when you saw his new style start to creep into this. And so what happened was, as the 60s would move on, he would be assigned to other titles like Daredevil, beginning with number 20. And which he would do pretty much all the issues from 20 through 100, which to me is quite impressive. He did them all except for 5 issues, 50, 51, 52, 83, and 99. He had feelings because, hey, the poor guy needs a break from penciling occasionally, or maybe he wanted to pencil something else. But also during this run, Stan and Gene Colan would create the villain, the Jester. And he became one of Daredevil's biggest pains for a long time in the 60s, and then kind of faded out. But the nice part about him doing the interiors was he also did a lot of covers, as well as, on any of the books he did. He would tend to do some of the covers, if not all of them. But again, as things moved on, he was asked then to take on Doctor Strange, when I think Bill Everett was doing it before that, I think. Anyway, whoever the artist was, he moved on. And writer Roy Thomas, I guess would either start or he was doing it before then. Didn't research that part, sorry. Anyway, but he would start with and do issues 172 to 178, 180 through 183. And this, of course, used to be called Strange Tales, and they've converted it into Doctor Strange. And his artwork at this point really fit this comic series because, Doctor Strange really is kind of a darkish looking comic to me. And his dark and moody style I thought he had really fit into this. I mean, I really grew to like Doctor Strange at this point in my life. I found a couple issues when I was a kid and just loved him. But again, what happened was Doctor Strange, if you didn't know it, lived in Greenwich Village. I guess that's in Manhattan or near Manhattan. And Gene Colan wanted to make sure that he did a good job with his location, his sanctum. And so what happened was he would go down there with a Polaroid camera and take pictures of various parts of the neighborhood, and so he would draw those areas into his paneling, which I think was pretty cool. Added more to the realism to it. Gene would then next begin working on another book besides Doctor Strange and stuff. He would go to work on Captain America. And he would begin on issue number 116 in 1968, and he would run through issue 137. And he, with Stan Lee, would then create a new hero in Captain America. This hero is called the Falcon. He would become the first African-American superhero to show up in Marvel, and he first appears in number 117 in 1968. And he would go on to do quite a bit of stuff. As you know, Falcon is now the new Captain America in the Marvel movie lineage. So, again, being creative, and I guess he must draw fast because during this time, he would team up with Stan Lee to create another new character called Captain Marvel, a Kree warrior. And he first appears in number 12 of the Marvel Superheroes Volume 1 series. And it was with him, Stan Lee. He was the artist, and inker is Frank Giacoia. And he would do this series, and it was, I guess, well sold. I mean, people really liked it. So then he would get his own series called the Captain Marvel series, Volume 1. And Gene Colan would do issues 1 through 4 and then move on. And he would get a reprint in issues number 36 in this series. And this all occurred in 1968. And what happened there was he was doing such a great job that they decided with writer Arnold Drake, which I have a podcast on this writer who did DC and Marvel work, they would create a new superhero group in Marvel Superheroes Volume 1, number 18, called the Guardians of the Galaxy. No, it's not the guys that were in the Marvel movies, but, or in the current comics. These were the original ones. And that became a bit of a hit. He would later, not him, but the book would show up later in Marvel Comics Presents, or not Marvel Comics event, Marvel Presents, I believe, in the early 70s. In the mid-60s, while he was doing this stuff, he decided he wanted to, I guess, show off some of his black and white material, which is awesome. He would begin work with a new black and white comic company called Warren Comics. Didn't do a lot of work in here, but he did some. In the bibliography, you can see all the issues that he did, but I'm going to show you the covers of Eerie number 2, Creepy number 8, and Blazing Combat number 3, which was a war book. And he did work in those 3. And I highly recommend, if you can find those, his work in there was beautiful, because, a lot of these artists, their black and white work is just fantastic. It'll just knock your socks off, in my opinion. But he would move on into the 1970s, and this would turn out to be a really great time for Gene Colan, because this is when I found out who he was, and it was through the fact that he was going to do a comic for Stan Lee. Stan decided he wanted to do a comic about, he was approached by Marv Wolfman to do a book called Tomb of Dracula. And for the artist, he originally was going to have, Stan was going to put in Bill Everett. He's an artist from the 40s, helped do the Submariner. I think he might have helped create the Submariner. But he was coming back to Marvel to do some work. And Stan was going to give him the Dracula book. Well, Gene heard about that. And he looked and he said, man, I want to do that. I really want to do that. So he went home and drew a sample page using the actor Jack Palance, who I think did a Dracula made-for-TV movie, or I think it was a movie that he was in where I think he played Dracula. I'm not sure on that, so don't hate me if I'm wrong. But anyway, he drew Jack Palance's Dracula. Goes into Stan, sees and says, here, this is why I want to do this. Look at this Dracula. Look at this page. Stan looked it over, looked at Gene, I guess, and said, you're on. And so Gene would join Marv Wolfman and go on to do the entire run of 70 straight issues of this book, Tomb of Dracula. And let me tell you, I got the first 2 or 3 issues of that, and I was sold, man. This guy's artwork was powerful, it was great, and the stories were awesome. This is when Marv was at the top of his game, in my opinion. But anyway, during this run, Marv and Gene would create a character called Blade. Remember him? He had 3 movies, and he was in the Deadpool Wolverine movie, too. And he would also go on and create Lilith, the vampire daughter of Dracula. And that was really good stuff. And he would go and do, I think he might have done some black and white work in the Dracula Lives book. I'm not sure. But he would also take on during this time a book called Howard the Duck, beginning with issue 4 through 31. He only didn't do number 5 and 1, 2, 3, of course. Gene and Steve Gerber, who was the writer, would create good characters like Dr. Bong. And they would have Howard run for president in 1976, which was pretty funny because during the presidential election, it was noted that Howard did receive thousands of actual votes in that presidential campaign. So, hey, that was pretty fun. And from there, he would then move back on to one of my favorite books. He would return to Doctor Strange, Volume 2. And Gene was there to take on the artwork beginning at issue number 11, and he would stay on it off and on up to issue 47. Didn't do them all in a row. There were, lots of filler. If you go to the bibliography at the end, you can find out what issues he did. But it was wonderful to see him back on that book. Really made it great for me. He would then go on to do many more various comics and covers for Marvel during the 1970s. There's just so much of it that I don't want to make this thing into a 5-hour-long thing going over each and every issue. Then things changed in Marvel in the 1980s. In 1981, Marvel would hire Jim Shooter to become editor-in-chief, and Gene Colan and some other artists and writers, I don't know, something happened. They, when he became editor-in-chief, they moved on. They actually, a lot of them left Marvel or started beginning to do work for other companies, which is more than likely DC Comics. And Gene would then move to DC Comics and begin working on Batman and Detective. And that ran from 1981 to about 1986. And he would start with Batman 343, and he would do it on and off up through 383. During this run, the writer Jerry Conway and Gene decided to go back into the Golden Age, and they brought back some old villains from there. One was Dr. Death in number 345, and one called the Monk in number 350. His detective comic run was really good. He would do that from numbers 510 through 565. Most of these issues, were done by him. In this run, Jerry Conway, was the writer also, and some other writers too. Him and Gene would create a character that's around today and very popular. And they helped create Killer Croc in issue number 523. And then later on in 529, they would create, with Doug Mensch as the writer, a character called the Night Slayer. And it was good. I mean, I highly recommend. If you like Gene Colan art, those issues are great to have. I mean, his art just fit it perfectly. It was just nice, dark moody, kind of liney a little bit, but that's the way I like that kind of dark stuff. And he would do this for a while. And he would also begin to work on a comic book, Wonder Woman. And he would start with a free 16-page insert in DC Comics Presents Volume 1, number 41. And the writer of that series that he was on was Roy Thomas. Man, he was a great writer back in the 70s and the 80s. And he would then, after that came out, I guess it was a big hit, he would then take on the existing series. And he would begin on it with Wonder Woman Volume 1, number 288 to 305. Some imagery for you. During this time, at DC, he would also do some miniseries, one of them called The Phantom Zone, 1 through 4. Really nice artwork. He would do another series called Night Force, number 1 through 14. I believe Mark Wolfman wrote those. Kind of a supernatural type thing, a supernatural group that would go after, bad supernatural, evil, that type of stuff. And it was really, really well done. He would also do a 12-part series called Silverblade, which was a kind of a Hollywood type thing. Murder mystery, I believe. I'm not sure. I had it. I read it years ago. I haven't read it since. I'm going to probably go back and look it over again one of these days. He would also help Doug Mensch with a new Spectre series, the original one that canceled in the 60s. And in the 80s, Doug Mensch decided to bring it back. And so Gene came on board, and he would do Spectre Volume 2, numbers 1 through 6. Really, again, really nice stuff. Gene fits it to a T. During this time, DC's letting him do some experimental stuff, and he created a series called Nathaniel Dusk. And he would do 2 of those. Each of them are 4-part series. And in this one, I don't believe he had an inker. He did all his stuff using graphite and watercolors. And it was I actually liked it. It was pretty different looking compared to your regular comics at the time. And it gave you a chance to see his work without having an inker on it. I'm not saying inkers are bad, please believe me. But it's kind of nice to see how the pencils look like and stuff. Because it's basically pencil art with graphite, I guess. And watercolored over it, and that character still exists today. They still use them off and on. So, and during the 1980s and 90s, he would go to work for doing a bunch of other stuff. I mean, I wonder if this guy ever took a vacation. He did Archie comic stuff, which I was surprised to find out. He would go to work for an independent company that showed up called Eclipse Comics, did a lot of black and white and some color work. He would do work for Dark Horse Comics, and it was nice because back then Dark Horse did a lot of black and white work, and a lot of his material he did was in black and white stuff. Again, these titles can all be found on my bibliography at the end of this program, so check it out. He would then move around his workload between Marvel and other companies, throughout the 90s and then into 2000s. He wasn't as prolific then, it seemed like, but he was doing a lot of independent materials, just a lot of stuff out there. And he was still looking really good. And he would do his final work in Captain America number 601. And it was still great looking artwork. Loved seeing him on it and stuff. But then after that, nothing much else really, I think, showed up too often. He would pass away at home at age 84, June 23rd, 2011, leaving behind, in my opinion, one of the largest amount of material I have ever seen. So I would really recommend, if you really think any of this looks intriguing to you, look around for his work. A lot of his work, believe it or not, in a lot of comic stores, online and stuff, is really cheap. I mean, if you don't want to buy the big major titles, he has a lot of great independent work that's just really cheap. And his artwork is just beautiful, especially in black and white. My biggest regret is I never got to meet this man. I would have loved to have met this guy and just tell him how much I loved his artwork and thank him for being there, because when you have like nice artwork and stuff, it keeps you in the comics. For me, at least, it did. I just kept on going and wanting to keep finding his work. If I saw work that had his name on it, I would go buy it, just because I knew it was going to be really good. And again, you can find a lot of this stuff. Check the bibliography for titles and issue numbers, but you'll find out that a lot of this stuff is reprinted out there. Like I say, a lot of it's cheap. His comic work is cheap, but you can get Marvel. They put this stuff out in trades and hardcovers, and just go into a comic store and ask them for it. If you find titles, you can go in and find out what version of this stuff it's in, because they've had cheap trade paperbacks, then they had expensive $100 hardcovers with the big giant omnibuses where they reprinted all in one big giant book on magazine stock paper. It's really nice stuff. It's a bit pricey, but it is nice, and I highly recommend that you should go find this stuff and look at it, and give a nod to Gene. Take a look at it, and take it from me, JW. I just think his art is wonderful, and I think you'll like it very much. And I want to thank you for watching this, and enjoy.
There's an old man with a tale to tell about funny books he knows so well. In a world of capes and thrilling plots, JW's corner sure hits the spots. He's got stories from the golden days, heroes, villains in an epic haze. With a twinkle in his wise old eyes, he brings the past to life, no disguise. Tune into JW's old comic corner. Every page is a treasure and he's the donor. Legends crafted with ink and wonder. His tales will roll like distant thunder. He's got interviews with comic greats, discussing fates and creative states. You'll hear secrets of the mighty pen from creators who remember when. Grab your headphones, dive in deep. Comic lore that'll make you leap. From Gotham streets to lofty peaks, each episode's a gem that's